everybody, and welcome to another episode of In Conversation. It's my great pleasure today to welcome Professor Kelly Reddy-Best to the podcast. Hey, Kelly, it's great to have you on. How's it going? And can I just ask where you're calling in from?
Yeah, it's really great. Thanks for having me here. I'm calling in from Ames, Iowa, which is a tiny little town in the middle of the United States.
And you're based there, and that is where Iowa State University is?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Okay. So you're based at Iowa State University. Can you just tell us a little bit briefly kind of what your role is there?
Yeah. So I'm a professor in fashion design and merchandising, and I also serve as the chief curator and director of ISU's Textiles and Clothing Museum. And I teach in culture history and social psychology of fashion, and it always relates to like fashion design and merchandising industry related topics.
It sounds like what you teach aligns quite closely with what your research interests are as well. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, they definitely do. I'm really fortunate in that sense that, like I teach a course called Queer Fashion, Culture History and the Industry, and that directly aligns with like some of the research that I do. And I teach a 100 level course on dress fashion identity and the fashion system, and like a doctoral theory course where we read all kinds of theoretical texts that I use all the time in my research, like all the different kinds of works that we read, I'll utilize or I'll find new things that I might use in research.
Well, of course, I know you well from your research and from some of the work you've published with us at Intellect. But today I was just having a look at your profile online, of course, and on the university website and elsewhere, having a bit of a snoop. And it sounds like you're very involved in teaching and that you're doing quite a lot of interesting, well, that you're personally involved in quite a lot of interesting kind of things going on at the university. What's the kind of approach at the university to teaching? It seems like it's very progressive and forward thinking.
Yeah, well, I think that my classes are, and that I think that there are definitely faculty. I think that there's a good balance, honestly, of a different ideas and different ways to teaching. I think that there's a lot of really progressive classes and teaching styles, and then there's also some like other fairly pretty conservative approaches. But we have like a minor called Fashion, Culture, History, and Social Justice, and which is really cool because the students can learn about the fashion industry, but then also think about it from a really critical lens. And so they might take the queer class. We have another class called Black Lives Matter, and it's about like fashion and politics and resistance movements. And a lot of our history courses are like rooted in a justice lens. So I would say in our fashion program, there are some really amazing faculty that do some really cool progressive work, but definitely I think that's different pockets across the university. Yeah.
As it seems to be across most of academia internationally.
Yeah, right. And it's good to have
publishing, of course, as well.
Yeah, totally. And it's good. I mean, it's good to have those minds there together and thinking about things in different ways. But yeah, I'm definitely a pretty progressive, or I would like to think of myself as fairly progressive in like how I like the topics I teach and things like that.
It often feels like fashion studies and a lot of the scholars that I work with on our fashion journals and fashion publications are kind of at the pointy end of progressive teaching and sort of trying to sort of combat different prejudices in academia, publishing, and in the worlds that we work in. Because I think we're maybe a little bit guilty sometimes, aren't we, in those worlds of thinking we're perhaps more progressive than we are, or that the systems aren't still embroiled in the same systemic issues that there are across society. Well, thanks for that anyway, but it's an interesting place to start, but I did want to ask you also about your work as a curator and a director. So what's the Textiles and Clothing Museum all about?
Yeah, so we are a fashion museum and we're based in the department. in fashion design and merchandising. And it was founded actually in 1924, so we're 100 years old. And it's a teaching focused museum, and so everything's student centered. And so it's like a 9,000 piece collection, and we have two main galleries, and it is used throughout the curriculum. And so that's like our main mission, where we want to engage the students with like object-based learning and material culture approaches to like understanding how the fashion system works. And so we'll use the objects in our history courses, of course, our culture courses, that's a total given, but then we also might use them in like our consumer courses or textile science or textile innovations, to look at all those different kinds of ways that you see like innovations develop over time and things like that. So yeah, so I manage all day-to-day operations, hire, train, and staff the museum, all with students. And we try to do 2 exhibitions a year that are focused on student engagement. So either students are co-curators, they install, they help prep, they do programming, everything like that. But yeah, that's the fashion museum.
That sounds like a really fascinating and cool resource, especially for the students to have on hand there as well. I always find it fascinating what certain universities, they have these amazing archives and collections that you might not be aware of, and then you kind of happen upon them, and it's always like, wow. I always remember going to Drexel and them having the sort of fashion and costume museum there as well, and that always being like inspiring. And then also like kind of materials and found materials and things like that you'll find at other different kinds of museums and in libraries across the country. That's very cool. Well, thanks for telling us a little bit about that. You've got any exciting or interesting exhibitions or anything coming up in the near future? Anything on the horizon?
Yeah. I'm actually working on an exhibition tentatively titled Fish Fashion. And I'm still in the works, but looking at it from all the ways that fish and fishing intersect with fashioning the body. So everything from anglers, like for sport, to commercial fisher people, or the use of fish in materials or prints. And so it's like it's around this idea of fish. And yeah, because there's in Iowa there, what inspired me is in Decorah, Iowa, which is northeast Iowa. There is it's a destination for a lot of fly fisher folks, and there's a lot of really great streams up there. And so focusing on like the local fishing, but then also like kind of looking at global fishing and how it intersects with the fashion system, which it does in a lot of different ways, which is really interesting.
It's not just all Orvis then. It sounds like there's a lot there.
Right. Yeah.
Cool.
There's some really fashionable fish gear.
Very cool.
Which is, yeah.
I suppose some very interesting sort of fabrics and materials as well.
Yeah, like high perform, and it's both that. It's like looking at high performance gear, everything from like technology and fishing gloves, waders. I mean, there's a lot of like technology there, like protection from the sun, but then there's also the ways that there's a lot of like really interesting ways that it intersects. And there's a lot of like fish prints too that are like really fun. And of course, thinking about environmental issues and like overfishing and things like that, fish nets, like fishnet stocking, there's all these really interesting surprises that I think will be really cool. And to really like get like a broader, to get different kinds of folks into the museum. I'm hoping to maybe have some like anglers in there who wouldn't have necessarily seen themselves in a fashion museum, but I'm hoping that they come and go to our programming and they can maybe teach us something.
No, that sounds well, and they are also obviously some serious artisanal craft folk involved in angling, especially fly fishing, tying them flies.
Yes, it's a whole craft.
Serious thing, yeah.
It is serious. And then you have them being picked, they'll have it on their hat. It's like there's like a whole combination of aesthetics that is involved in this that, we're going to hopefully, it's coming up next year or so, but I'm in the works on that.
Well, I mean, I think I'm going to have to suggest that you maybe should consider doing a special themed issue of one of our journals. That would be a
Yeah.
very cool. Maybe curatorial, our Journal of Curatorial Studies, perhaps. There's definitely, I think, a few of our publications that would be keen for a special themed issue on those topics. That's cool. It's amazing where you can go with certain exhibitions. I think
Yeah.
if anyone listening wants to find out a bit more, I guess they can go on ISU's website or the ISU Textiles and Clothing Museum website and find out a bit more information about that and the museum in general, I guess.
Yeah, we keep it pretty updated. So any of our upcoming exhibitions, once they're ready to be publicized, we put it right up there. So.
Oh, well, thanks for sharing about that. And I think that leads me nicely onto journals, though. And of course, you work with Intellect on a couple of journals. You're an editorial board member of Intellect's Fashion, Style and Popular Culture. And then you're an associate editor of Critical Studies in Fashion and Beauty as well. So I just wanted to ask you a little bit about those journals and the work that you kind of undertake on the board and I suppose more as an editor as well. So can you just tell us a little bit about what you kind of do on those journals and just maybe just a little bit about the journals themselves?
Yeah. So I, as a board member and then an associate editor, I primarily assist the editors, and largely it's almost always around reviewing. So they'll call on me to review papers a little bit more frequently than an ad hoc reviewer. So in some ways, I feel like a dedicated reviewer for the journal. Or I might recommend reviewers. That's also something that I think is a really big task. I think editors have a huge job and they get a lot of different topics. And so I think the editors, especially, Susan and Annika and Joe, who are the editors of those specific journals, they're really wonderful and really smart people. And I think what I've really learned from them too is like to lean on the other folks around you. So they might need some assistance in some area, although I think they're really great. So I'm like, I don't know how much help they need from me, but but yeah, so that's primarily my role. And I think about the journals, I think they're two really great places for different kinds of work, and specifically, like, Journal of Fashion, Style, Popular Culture, you get like a cross section of the intersections of fashion and popular culture, which is really nice, and like different approaches to scholarship, which I really appreciate. And then Critical Studies in Fashion and Beauty, again, a different, similar yet slightly different, but you see a lot of works that's takes a more critical approach, like maybe not necessarily with theory, but you'll see different ways of like writing in that journal. I suppose I might say.
I was going to say they both, for me as well, they stand out because they have a lot of really interesting themed issues or guest edited issues. I know that for Susan and Joe, that's both important to both of them, and also providing, I think, sort of emerging scholars maybe the opportunity to take the helm and lead an issue of a journal, and other people from the board and things like that. There's been some cool ones that stuck out for me recently, but there was the Arctic fashion one from Critical Studies in Fashion and Beauty. I remember being really interested in that recently. But yeah, have you guys got anything? Are you aware of any other interesting issues that might be on the horizon, or any topics that might be coming up in the near future?
Yeah, I think actually in Susan and Annika's journal, they just, I believe, published their special issue on the intersections of trans identity and fashion. And I think that's really important. And really cool that they're doing that. Not every journal would, while I like to think that folks are progressive and thinking in new ways, not every editor and editorial board thinks in that way. So I think that's really wonderful. And I believe Joe's, oh gosh, he's got so many good special issues coming out. Gosh, they're like rapid fire. They're
Yeah.
so good.
I
Like
always
none
say
of
to people, just keep an eye on the website for fashion, style, and popular culture for sure, because there's always about 3 or 4 different special themed issues that Joe has in the, lined up, I think, and they're very diverse in terms of topics and the focus. I think that's one of the interesting things about both of those journals, but probably especially with fashion, style, and popular culture, is they're very interdisciplinary, right? And I think before that was kind of you know, a trendy topic or a trendy way of kind of approaching a discipline. So I feel like that means that they focus a lot on these really interesting and innovative special issues and different themes that you think, oh, okay, yeah, cool, all right, yeah, anglers, let's do with that this time, right? So, but yeah, no, also really good. I think that recent issue, I haven't had the chance to have a good look at it yet myself, but yeah, it's nice nice to see that topic coming to the forefront and for them not sort of shying away from difficult topics as well. And that thing maybe takes me back to my first point, my first question to you as well, because I feel like I was reading that you've been doing quite a lot on trans fashion and different brands. Is that right? Whether it's in your own team or at Iowa State in general. Just tell us a little bit about that, or some of the work that's been coming out.
Yeah. So I look at a lot of different identities from an intersectional perspective, but I do oftentimes focus on like queer and trans identities. And yeah, I just recently published a paper in Intellect in critical studies in fashion and beauty with actually co-authored with a student of mine, and we looked at trans YouTubers and DIY undergarments, and looked at that from like an informal economy perspective, and like the ways that they're creating like trans and queer world making, like creating space in particular for like queer and trans folks who are oftentimes experience marginalization, which then leads to socioeconomic disparities. And so these YouTubers create videos to produce really inexpensive trans affirming undergarments. And it was based on an exhibition that my student and I had done at the Textiles and Clothing Museum. Yeah, and so that's one work. Lots of other different ways to think about queer and transness, but I have a book coming out on queer and trans fashion brands, and I worked with 24 different queer and trans fashion brands, and to look at how they emerged and the different ways that they navigate the fashion system. And arguably, I think they're like pioneers. In some ways, I compare it to not in the book, but when I'm talking casually, these brands emerged largely like post same-sex marriage. So a lot of them emerged like in the 21st century. And in the same ways that the Black-owned brands emerged in the 80s and the 90s, right? It was like this revolution in the fashion system. And I think that when we look back, that these brands, there was like a proliferation of brands that emerged, and it was, largely after same-sex marriage, right? And so capitalizing on that market, and I hate to use the word, it is capitalism in which we're operating, but
It is, yeah.
It is definitely capitalism. But of course, they're like balancing that line, and I kind of like unpack the nuances of like how they consider, serving their communities, because almost all of them are queer, trans identifying, and then also remaining above the red, like not going bankrupt, because it's hard, to go into the fashion system. So yeah.
I imagine even more so in recent years post-pandemic. I mean, just speaking from experience within the publishing industry, there's so many more costs now. So yeah, it does pose some different challenges, that's for sure. Speaking about challenges though, I was interested in maybe asking you maybe for some advice, as you have published in many journals, you're writing this book, you know, you published this books previously as well. And of course, you're in that unique position as an associate editor and a board member as well of these fashion journals. If there was an emerging scholar looking to maybe get their first published article out there in a fashion journal, for example, do you have any sort of advice for them? Anything that you would like, top tips or any key things that they should be aware of?
Yeah, I would say be really open to feedback and like don't think of failure as the end. Think of it as the beginning. And the reviewer, oftentimes people will speak negatively about the reviewers, but the reviewers are what make you, and the anonymous reviewers are what make you a really great scholar, because they don't hold back. They don't know you, you don't know them. They are, you know, sometimes it can be a little direct, but I would just say, don't take it, it's not personal. They are just using their expertise. And sometimes you can disagree with them. I think that's also, you know, you can argue your way through if you, you know, maybe not the first couple times, but maybe like after the next few times. But yeah, that like failure is part of, or like so-called failure is definitely part of that. And like as many publications that I have so many rejections or revision and resubmit, major revision, risky, you know, all of those are part of it. And honestly, I think that's how I've grown as a scholar. I think my mentors are amazing and I love them, but like really it's the peer reviewers that will just propel you because they don't hold back.
I think that's a really good advice. And I guess you want to make sure you're submitting to a journal that has a robust and anonymous peer review process in place, where you can get a couple of readers who don't know you. And it's all behind that kind of anonymity, that wall of anonymity. But yeah, I think that's really important advice, because, you know, even if you don't get, you know, published for that article, it, you know, it teaches you how to write for that type of publication and that type of audience. I think that's really important and quite a unique skill. Like writing for journals is different, and even if you've published books, you know, or chapters, or you know,
very different.
I think the other thing is like it's good if you're, you know, maybe even earlier, you know, you're working on your PhD or even your master's, and you're drafting that dissertation thesis, you know, and if you're able to send or you cut bits into publishable articles and send them into journals, even if they don't get published, you're going to get that expertise and that anonymous kind of feedback outside of your, you know, your supervisor and the other people that you're working with directly. I think having that quite objective and like you say, quite direct, you know, you sometimes have to wear that thick skin, don't you?
Yes.
But failure is definitely the start of the future when it comes to journal publishing. So I think that is
and just keep submitting. Like I'm like, just submit. I mean, the worst thing that we'll do is they'll say no, and then you can revise and resubmit there or somewhere else, you know. So
I feel I feel sorry for a lot of early career scholars trying to publish their first article there, because there's almost like there's a proliferation of options and opportunities. There's a lot more, I guess, distractions or things to consider now, whether it be open access, whether it be kind of only, what these different what different forms of open access are, what that means, the ethics around it, and then of course all these different rankings and indexes, databases, and you know, and of course a lot of universities, especially in certain parts of the world, they're like, well, it has to be Q1, Q2, it has to have this, an impact factor or something like that. It needs to be open access. It needs to be this, that, and the third. And you're like, I just want to get published, you know. So
I know.
It's a difficult time and definitely a minefield for people who haven't perhaps published their first essay and article. But I'd say definitely stick with it, right, and submit. Because that's the best way to like gain some confidence as well as some experience and kind of, you know, understanding and how to navigate the system. And I guess there's a lot of people out there now from publishers and from journals, you know, who are delivering workshops and things on navigating the pitfalls, the issues, the hurdles. So I guess that would be my advice as well, is to check out lots of different websites,
Yeah, yeah.
Publishers' journals, and universities, right? A lot of universities and libraries will have a lot of resources about publishing or what journals are considered to be, ethical or acceptable in terms of quality. So do use those resources, right? And
Yeah, yes. I still go to those whenever there's like an editor workshop. I'm going because
yeah.
I want to hear what they have to say.
we tried to give or deliver a lot of these types of workshops when we were attending conferences. Myself and other colleagues do that, and it's funny because quite often it is the more established scholars who've had a rich history of publishing who are sort of like, hang on a minute, what hang on, tell me that again, and they're taking further notes because things change, and since the pandemic things have changed quite a lot. So you're never too old or experienced to learn a new trick or two when it comes to the murky worlds of publishing, that's for sure.
Yeah, totally. And editors change and disciplines change. Yeah, I'm always learning how to how to navigate the system, and we're best to apply my work. So.
I also wanted to ask you just a little bit about your experiences with Intellect, because we're celebrating our 40th anniversary this year, which is a real milestone for us, even though it's compared to some of the older publishers, it's a drop in the ocean. But I just wanted to ask you, as someone who's worked with us on a number of projects, is there anything that you particularly like or respect about Intellect? Anything that maybe makes us different? Interested to get those perspectives from people when I'm having them on the podcast.
Yeah. I really like the different niche topics that each journal offers. So I always, when I'm talking with my colleagues or my mentees, I'll often say, you want to find a journal that can fit your topic. And I think that's what Intellect has, this great spread of all these really amazing spaces. And then within those spaces, there are these amazing editors who make so much of the journal. And so I have so much respect for so many of the editors, and working with those editors is just working with a great editor is so wonderful. And that's one thing I really appreciate about they're rigorous, but they're also, I'm learning. And certainly there's sometimes direct comments, but that's anywhere. And you have to, put on your thick skin and just be like, all right, this is to help me improve. So, but yeah, that's I think some of the editors, Susan, Annika, Andy, Riley, who was editor of Critical Studies of men's fashion.
Yeah.
They've all made me think in different ways. Oh, Joe of Clothing Cultures. Oh, I also love that journal. And the editors really make me think in new ways, with their comments. And so that's something I really, really like about the journals. Is that
that's really cool. You've mentioned some of those journals, because I think that goes a long way to proving your point, in the sense that within an area like fashion studies, I think we have 14 different journals, and maybe 10 plus years ago when we founded some of these journals, more than 15, more than that for a lot of them, there were people sort of saying, well, hang on a minute, there's no way they can sustain this, and why is there a need for all of these topics? And here we are 15 years later, 10 years later, depending on the journal, and they're thriving, and there's the one thing we don't have a shortage of, for the most part anyway, is submissions. And because we operate that robust peer review process, and we have these really gifted editors at the helm, we're able to publish a lot of interesting and emerging topics, and of course new and emerging scholars as well as seasoned professionals. So yeah, I think fashion's especially an area where we've kind of really diversified, and we've shown that you don't just have to have the Journal of Fashion Studies or whatever it might be, that you can have these more niche and specialist or disciplinary interpretations of a topic like that, and that all it does is help generate more space for the topic to grow, or for the subject and the field to grow in general. Well, yeah, and thank you very much for being a part of that too.
Yeah.
You deserve your flowers as well, especially when you're connecting publishing, publishers, but also conferences with your work at CSA and other places, the Costume Society of America. of course, and then the museum and other things. So I think it shows how important it is within a discipline like fashion studies, generally speaking, where we have all these different connections are working together. And that's one of the reasons I very much enjoy working in fashion studies, I think. Yeah, anyway, I digress, but yeah, thank you very much for that. That's a welcome comment. Thank you. I wanted to ask you a couple more questions, and we're going to get into some quick time questions now, basically. So just some light-hearted questions I wanted to ask you. So if you're ready, I'll reel some off. So to begin with, I just wanted to ask, are there any scholars or particular schools of thought that have influenced your own thinking or perhaps your own writing and research?
Yeah, I would say Alison Kafer changed my life. She wrote Feminist Queer Crip, and that book changed my life, my whole way of thinking. And then Kimberly Crenshaw too, Intersectionality, that book definitely changed my life. And then I would say like my students, I don't know, Dice Matthews, who I've published in Intellect with, she has changed my perspective. My late student, Dana Gooden, she sadly passed away in 2020 during the pandemic, but she's Comanche, or she was Comanche. And yeah, like she taught me about indigenous ways of knowing. So I view them as, they're like emerging scholars, but I view them as like just as much of a scholar as any seasoned professional because they think in really interesting ways. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Oh, that's great. Thank you very much for that answer. And the next one I have for you is about designers. And do you have any sort of favorite designers, or are you more of a kind of high street, like more of a general brand type person, or are there any kind of high fashion designers that you're really into?
Yeah, I really love Mary Mecco and the prints there. I also really like Issey Miyake, just because like the architectural structure of the different silhouettes. But I also really like some of the early Black designers, Black brands like Carl Kanai, Cross Colors, and kind of like what they did and I mean I like their aesthetic. I'm a white person, so I'm aware of like my positionality in relation to them, but I have a lot of respect for them and I love like the look of their brands and stuff too. So
Very cool. Okay. Thank you very much. And I guess leading on from there, quite a nice connection perhaps. What about cities? Do you have any favorite cities?
yeah, Providence, Rhode Island.
Okay, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, so I did my undergrad in that city, and then it's close to the beach, and I grew up in New Jersey, South Jersey, near Philly, near the beach. So I love the beach, and there's good food there, like really good food, tons of different kinds. And yeah, and I have like a lot of memories there, from college. So yeah.
And what kind of, if you don't mind me asking, what sort of took you to ISU? Was it simply career, or was there a kind of a different reason you ended up there?
Oh, just career. Yeah. I lived in Oakland before this, and worked at San Francisco State. And then, yeah, just a change up of scenery and offered this cool job.
Yeah.
Sounded great. I figured, oh, I'll try the Midwest. I'd never lived anywhere in between like the coast. So it was like a really big, not being near the ocean was like really a big decision to make, like I love the ocean. But yeah, it was the job took us here.
Ah, very cool. It's always interesting to me because especially within fashion studies, you find that quite a lot of people end up maybe in the South or in the Midwest because a lot of the established and old school fashion departments or come out of some of those universities like Kent State or your own, of course, and various other different places. So it's always interesting how people often end up there when they're in those disciplines. And I guess it's often academics who do end up in like kind of like a lot of interesting places. And also, I asked you that question, what's your favorite city? And it sounds like you've had experience of quite a few that you're able to have some sense of experience of different places as well. So that's really cool. Thank you. Okay. And what about guilty pleasures? Do you have any guilty pleasures?
Yeah, I love binging Netflix shows. Like most recently, Bridgerton,
Okay.
Cast, Stranger Things, or I'll watch like it's not on Netflix, but Law and Order SVU. I love Olivia Benson. Like she's my favorite of all time. So
Not world's greatest anglers yet, though.
Oh, not
Oh,
yet, not
okay,
yet. I'm still into my like, Netflix like binging of like, I mean, I don't know. I feel I'm pretty open about it, but some people look down on binging TV shows.
we all need our vices, right? And we all need to turn off from time to time. And I think, yeah, binging shows is definitely a good way to disconnect your brain for a few hours at the end of the day. Sometimes, that's for sure. And anyway, there's like, if you're looking at it from like a fashion and textiles perspective, costuming, things like that, there's always like something you can, be.
Yeah, like Bridgerton. I mean,
Yeah,
there was a lot of cool fashions on that. I was more into like the scandal.
yeah, yeah. I was giving you an option there to, try and play it hard out. I'm glad you didn't take the bait. Good for you.
No.
All right, well then I got another silly one for you as well. So you're going to be trapped in a lift, minimum of an hour. What person are you going to be trapped in that lift with if you had the option to choose?
Okay, so I think like, all right, my first response is like Taylor Swift because I just like Taylor Swift. But then I thought, maybe my yoga teacher Wendy, who's like small, and I was like, man, I probably should be stuck there with Wendy because she's so relaxing and we can just do our yoga. But then I was like, I mean, if initial reaction, it'd probably be T Swift.
Yeah, I think you want to connect the binge side of the brain rather than the sensible, objective side of the brain. Go with
Right.
T Swift and the yoga, though. I get it. Like, you're not going to have any anxiety attacks, are you? If
Yeah, I'll just be in there with Wendy. We'll just be doing our thing. But I was like, if I'm with T Swift, we could be just jamming out, like belting out her songs.
Yeah, and there's certainly plenty of topics with T Swift that you could pick up on anyway. So, okay, I think both good answers, and maybe because they're such good answers, we'll allow you two people. So perhaps we can have a yoga class with Taylor Swift and of course Wendy at the helm. So, and then, well, look, my final question for you today is just what are you working on? What's coming up? What's in the future for Kelly Reddy-Best?
Yeah. I'm finishing up that book, Queer and Trans Fashion Brands, and then I'm working on.
I was going to let me jump in there then. When and where can we expect to see that one?
Yeah, it's coming out very soon. It's with Bloomsbury, and it's expected August 2025. But I hit my deadlines early. Like I was early on my deadlines, and I'm very proud of that. So I already have the cover. It's in proofs, so I'm just rocking and rolling on that one.
Cool.
And then, yeah, I'm working on two other books. One is with my student, and we're working on it. It's on Puerto Rican Bamba fashion, and so like the history and culture of Bamba in Puerto Rico, and then it's like both historical and then contemporary uses and meanings, and so it's based on like oral histories and ethnographies in Puerto Rico, and then also looking, like at the history of, colonization of Puerto Rico and like the horrible genocide of the Taínos, which are the indigenous people, the colonization by the Spanish, and then they brought over enslaved Black people. And so you have that mixture of culture and then the proliferation of Bamba, which is like a music genre and dance. And then I'm working on this other book about fashioning authenticity, and I want to look at all the ways that we like think about authenticness or authenticity. So whether it's like authenticity in meaning, authenticity in maker, in wearing, and I think I'm turning it into a book project. I'm into books now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a really fascinating topic because that's a loaded topic as well. This authenticity is obviously quite problematic. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and like who's putting up right, and that's why I'm really interested. Because a lot of my work has like kind of intersected with that. Like are you queer enough, or even if it's like ethnicity, it's like, well, your folk costume isn't made with these beads from this location, so there's like all these, and like who's putting up those borders and boundaries and who's breaking those. And so yeah, I'm gonna look at it from like a borders and boundaries perspective, and like look at a whole plethora of literature, and like theorize about that. So yeah, I'm kind of excited about that one. And then also, of course, the fish fashion is like another project, which
I
I'm like really excited about. It'll be an exhibition, but then who knows? Maybe it'll be an edited volume. Maybe it'll be a book. Maybe I'll send a book to Intellect.
Hey, well, I'm fighting for that one. You've piqued my interest, that's for sure.
Because it's so cool. I mean, I did recently get into fly fishing, which is like why I'm interested in this. So, yeah, I like fly fish all the time and I'm like really into it, which is partially why I'm, doing this. But,
I'm having to really contain my fish puns right now and my dad jokes, I think. Well, look, Kelly Reddy-Best, thank you so much for joining us today on the In Conversation podcast. It's been absolutely wonderful having you as a guest, and really interesting talking about such a wide range of topics. Sounds like there's plenty of cool things coming up for you, whether it be books, journals, and then of course things going on at the Textiles and Clothing Museum at ISU. So wishing you all the best of luck with that and all the future endeavors. I hope everyone watches this space for that fly fashion book or whatever we're going to be doing on angling and fashion. I hope that comes some way towards so that comes Intellect's way at some point in the future. But yeah, thank you very much for all your time today. Any final thoughts from you?
No, just thank you so much for this opportunity. It was really fun talking to you.